You're listening to The Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
The big story dominating the NFL draft is what's happening in Green Bay between the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has even told teammates that he will never play for the Packers again. So what happens now with Rodgers and Green Bay? For more on this story, we get a local perspective with a guy that everyone on SportsMap Radio is quite familiar with. He is Bill Schmid. He is our night host right here on SportsMap Radio, the host of SportsMap All Night, and he's kind enough with his time here on a Saturday to talk all things Aaron Rodgers. Bill, appreciate it, my man. Thanks for coming on.
Fellas, I'm going to give you a lot more than Aaron Rodgers gave Mike Tirico reportedly a couple of minutes ago at Churchill Downs. Said, yeah, guys, I just hate that this had to come public. Well, that's interesting. Seeing that feels like David Dunn entered the chat, Aaron Rodgers' agent, just a couple of days ago, man, as round one was commencing.
You know, it's interesting you say that, Bill, because for him to act as if he had nothing to do with it coming out seems to be a bit suspect. It seems very in line with Aaron Rodgers to wait until the exact day a year ago when they drafted his eventual replacement to then leak it out publicly that he's unhappy with the situation in Green Bay.
You know, it's as calculated as anything I think I've witnessed in the National Football League, right up there to something we lived 13 years ago here in this state and cheering for this team when Brett Favre returned to Green Bay on the day of their family night scrimmage. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware of what the family night scrimmage has turned into, but in Green Bay, they sell tickets for like $5 or $8 a piece, and they pack Lambeau Field with 70,000 people for a practice at night. And people will tailgate for 6-7 hours before the practice at night. And when Brett Favre decided that he was going to come back from Hattiesburg, Mississippi and demand his starting job back in 2008, he picked a very convenient time. Him and Deanna landed in the private jet hours before the family night scrimmage, and it was a spectacle, Jake. I'm telling you, we were on Flight Tracker here trying to figure out when he was going to land, and they're sticking him in a box, and they won't tell you which box because they don't want the local television stations that the Packers technically control to show, the circus that's going on in the front office. And Aaron Rodgers pulls something very, very similar. Now, I'm all about the get back. I'm all about the petty. So I personally think it's genius. I loved it. And it's one of these deals, man, that there's fault on both sides. And generally in a divorce, there is fault on both sides. But right now, if you're trying to judge where it's at, they're either sleeping in different bedrooms and talking to lawyers, or you're having conversations as to who's moving out first.
So you mentioned the Brett Favre situation. I actually talked about this in my previous segment, Bill. To me, the Favre situation is like apples to oranges to what Rodgers is going through, because with Brett Favre, he was threatening to retire every single year. Finally, the Packers were like, all right, well, we can't do this every year. We'll draft Aaron Rodgers. This situation, they draft Rodgers' replacement with Jordan Love a year after they're coming off a 13-3 season where they're on the cusp of going to the Super Bowl.
We like to say that we can just repeat history and turn back the clock. And the timelines are a little bit more similar when I look back at it and kind of did a deeper dive into it. But the coming off of a 13-3 season and going to the NFC Championship game being Brett Favre's final game in Green Bay, that's the only real football-wise concurrent you can draw. The Packers were 4-12. In the 2006 season, after they drafted Rodgers. They were horrible. But the Packers were just coming off of a 13-3 season when they picked the eventual successor. And that's where, man, this rift between Rodgers and Brian Gutekunst, who I said it last year when the selection was made, Jake, Gutekunst was starting to trend in the line of fans were looking at him saying, what have you done for me lately, man? You drafted 3 of these wide receivers, and now Marquez Valdes-Scantling turned into a little bit of a player and more of the deep threat they had thought he was going to be. They picked this cat, Jamon Moore, who I think suited up in 16 NFL games before he was out of the league in the 4th round. They had swung and missed. And when push was coming to shove, Brian Gutekunst in his third NFL draft was going to have to get some hits. You lock up some job security, man, when you take a quarterback in the first round. There's no way you're leaving without that guy playing. And there was some of that on my side. I felt Gutekunst made a legacy play when, frankly, there were some folks that were questioning if he was the right choice for the job. When he got the job, there were some really, really highly qualified people in the room. Elliot Wolf, who what his father Ron did for the organization cannot be understated or talked about enough. He took them out of the doldrums of a 30-year absence of just mediocrity, and the height, the ceiling was like 7 and 9, dude. It was brutal here for a long, long time. And they changed the way the football organization was run. Elliot Wolf was in-house. He was a candidate. He was passed over. Alonzo Highsmith, longtime Green Bay Packer front office guy, was passed up. He moved on. Same deal with John Dorsey was in the conversations, who's an incredible roster builder. We know that he has his flaws as a personnel guy, but he's an incredible roster builder. And Reggie McKenzie as well. So, like, there were a lot of guys that were in the conversations for it. Gutekunst came out of nowhere, took the job, and when he selected Love last year, there were some questions as to what he had done with the roster in his 3 years. He swung and locked himself in, and he's going to get an extension here coming up. It might just be because they're going to have to figure out what they got in 10 instead of 12.
You know, we're talking with Bill Schmid, who, of course, is our nighttime host here on Sports Map Radio. He's based in Wisconsin. He's the perfect guy to talk to get the latest on Aaron Rodgers. There's a report, Bill, that came out earlier from Yahoo Sports that Rodgers won't report back to the Packers unless they fire the general manager. I mean, is that really what it's going to take? What are your thoughts on that report from Yahoo Sports?
It doesn't seem. It seems like it's going to be somewhat either or. And I heard you talking about it in the segment prior to me coming on, talking about Jordan Love, where there's some similarities to this situation with what Brady had going on when they drafted Garoppolo in the second round. Now, albeit the Patriots didn't trade up to go get Jimmy Garoppolo, so let's make sure we throw that caveat in there. They gave up an extra fourth-round pick in the deepest wide receiver draft in history. And, oh, by the way, then said, we didn't have enough capital to take a wide receiver later on in the draft. You ended up with none when it was probably your biggest need going in. So I see it as either Gutekunst moves away or you take out this Utah State elephant in the room of my successor and bring in a backup that I can have some camaraderie with and work with. It does feel like it's going to be either or, but if I had to handicap it at this moment, Jake, it feels very similar to what we all watched about a year ago while we were starving and thirsting for sports content. There was an ultimatum laid down, and it was, this is your final year. And I'm talking about what happened in Chicago with the Chicago Bulls. Two completely different dynasties, because the Packers dynasty is kind of the one that never actually happened. But it feels like there's going to be 17 regular season games remaining, and whatever postseason run you can ultimately make. And then that's going to be it in 2022. Each side is going to go their own separate ways and deal with it and have the outcomes that come.
Bill, explain the Rodgers contract situation. So I know there's a very light cap hit if they were to cut him after this upcoming season. Can he opt out, though? Does he have a no trade clause? What's the specifics of Rodgers' contract here?
Well, they inked Rodgers to a contract, and that's another part of this, Jake, that's funny to go back to, and I appreciate you bringing it up because I genuinely forget about it sometimes. The first decision that Brian Gutekunst made after he took over for Ted Thompson, who the organization somewhat had stepped down. There were some really, really difficult health issues going on with Ted, and God rest his soul. He had to move away, and they stepped Brian Gutekunst in. The first thing Brian Gutekunst did as the general manager of the Green Bay Packers was make Aaron Rodgers the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. That was the first move he made as the general manager, but it solidified a $37.5 million cap hit this year, which is the largest cap number any player will play under in 2021 currently. Then next year it goes to about $17 million of dead cap money. And while a lot of teams will not even touch that thought, in the NFL now, you just watched the Philadelphia Eagles eat over a $40 million cap hit for the better part of the next 2 years with Wentz. Same deal with Goff in LA, pardon me. So it's a little bit less of an unknown now to see teams do that. But after the 2022 season, he would be making about $30 million if he plays in 2023. The Packers have only $2 million of dead cap money. That was from a restructure a year ago. So the ability for the Packers to move on in 2022 is very, very easy for Brian Gutekunst, and that's something they're not willing to give up. And understandably so, Aaron wants to have at least the security for 2 more seasons in Green Bay. It feels justified on each side. However, you genuinely want your cake and eating it too. Brian Gutekunst thinks the Packers have all the leverage here, and I'm just not so sure with the way that the league is trending and the way that fan bases are kind of trending, Jake. We are more player-driven and player-oriented that I've noticed in the last couple of years. In this instance is definitely showcasing it.
Bill Schmid with us here as we talk about the latest with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Bill, you mentioned it earlier. Rodgers at the Kentucky Derby. He, of course, tells Mike Tirico that he's bothered that it came out now and that he expressed how much he still loves Green Bay.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like, what's a timeline now? Like, if he doesn't show up, are the Packers just willing to say, we're not trading you, go away, come back whenever you want to play? Would they actually entertain trade offers? What happens now?
Well, you mentioned the Charles Robinson story earlier on today, and in a part of the Robinson report, which was a really, really well done story, the correlation between Carson Palmer's situation in Cincinnati and Green Bay, the links around it are tremendous. Where David Dunn was Carson Palmer's agent, he's Aaron Rodgers' agent as well as Jordan Love's agent. So a weird little dynamic there that David Dunn might want both of them to play at the same time, realizing it can't happen both in Green Bay. Just a little quirk into it in the money game. But there's going to have to be something before July 29th when they end up reporting up here to Green Bay. Because the last dance scenario, which I'm already trying to print up T-shirts of the last leap, Jake, I think that's what we're going to trademark it, the last leap in Green Bay. There's going to have to be some mending of fences by that time. And I would also imagine that the contract's going to have to get addressed if Rodgers ends up returning, because realistically, they don't have anyone else to adjust a contract to. There's some language in Rodgers' contract that they can force so that they can at least pay these players that are coming into the organization now that they're drafting, and it appears they're going to take all 10 guys that they had picks for. There's going to have to be some movement there. We're going to know something within the next month and a half, because this June 1st drop dead date is also a real thing, where you talked about the contract and we were just discussing it. Half of his cap hit would be transferred over to 2022 if traded post June 1st. So they would be assessed a $22 million cap charge this year, which would drop at about $16 million from where he's sitting at right now, fully locking in $19 million against the cap, dead cap money next year. It's about $3 million extra as to what they would pay if they would have moved on from him there. So that post June 1st trade scenario is legitimate, but I would imagine the way that this is now spreading like wildfire, we're going to know more and more, and the tea leaves are going to continue to start falling. If he is traded after June 1st, I think we know where and probably what most of the compensation is within the next couple of weeks.
Bill, great stuff, my friend. Thank you for taking time on your off day to join us here on Sports Map Radio to break down the latest with Rodgers. I hope you have a good weekend, and I don't know, man, maybe the Bucs will win a championship to make up for this whole Green Bay stuff.
Well, Jake, it's funny you brought that up, because Thursday was an interesting day in Wisconsin, because not only did Aaron Rodgers say he doesn't want to be a Green Bay Packer anymore, Corbin Burns, NL Cy Young candidate, goes on the IL with health and safety protocols, so we all know what that means. And Giannis sprains his ankle as they lose to the worst team in the NBA. So, hey, just get kicked in the nads. That's what Wisconsin sports fans continue to do. Have a good one, buddy.
I appreciate it, Bill. Can only go up from there in Wisconsin. Bill Schmid with us there, of course, on our progressive guest line. Does a great job. He hosts nights on our network, Sports Map, all night, Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time. Definitely listen to him. He does a great job. We'll take a quick break, wrap up hour 1 of 3. This is the Jake Asman Show right here on a Saturday on Sports Map Radio.
Are you thinking that it's time to start looking for